This 125 has double the horsepower of popular bikes like KTM's RC 125. It's incredibly nimble and makes a beautiful noise.
2 years riding this and you'll be a better all-round biker than anyone on the KTM. And yet, most 16-year-olds don't even know that these exist, let alone want one. All the popular 125s at the moment are boring. To be fair, they all look exciting. Tell me you wouldn't want a CB 125 or an R125 or even a retro-looking XSR 125. Manufacturers have mastered making little 125s look like their bigger relatives, and I've only mentioned a few.
But they all have the same boring engine configuration. All a single cylinder, all a 4-stroke, all making around 15 horsepower, all electric start, all water-cooled.
There's just no imagination. I think this is why when people talk about beginner bikes these days, we mostly talk about 300s and 400s, because those are exciting, not to mention faster.
We have KTM's single-cylinder approach in the Duke and the RC. There's Yamaha's parallel twin creation living in the R3 and MT-03. Kawasaki even win this battle with an inline 4-cylinder in their new ZX4RR.
Now that is an entertaining segment. There's something different for everyone. So back to my case for this 125. It can make about 3/4 of the power that the average 300 can from a mere single-cylinder 125, just by changing one simple thing from all the other 125s I've mentioned.
It's a 2-stroke. That means there is an explosion every time the piston reaches top dead center. Not only every second time like a 4-stroke would, and twice the bangs make twice the power in this case.
But the best part is that it's also lighter than all those heavy 4-strokes, because 2-stroke engines are far more simple and require fewer parts. And we all know the benefit of power to weight. Well, actually the best part is that because these engines are simpler, they're also cheaper to make. So a 125 doesn't have to cost upwards of $5,000 like a new KTM Duke, for example. But in all seriousness, the best part is the infamous power band.
This is the part of the rev range where an engine makes the most power. But good 2-strokes have a part called a power valve that looks like this. It closes at low RPM to restrict the size of the exhaust port, changing the airflow of the engine and giving it more usable power down low.
However, the real magic happens when it opens at around 7,000 RPM on this bike, and the engine comes alive in a way that is definitely not subtle.
It's an instant and very noticeable jerk in power, forcing you to tug on the bars. And for the next 3,000 RPM, you get a rush more addictive than crack.
By which time you shift up a gear and do it all over again. Of course, those 4-stroke engines still have a power band. It's just broader. 2-strokes are famous for having narrow and abrupt power bands. But if you've ever ridden one, you'll know that that is what makes them so rewarding when you can ride them in this zone.
So am I suggesting that 16-year-olds who are still learning to ride need a faster bike that's harder to ride and also rewards being ridden fast?
Well, yes. What did you expect from a biker? But I have some real reasons too. For starters, a 2-stroke will teach you to ride better. You can't just let the clutch out, for example, like you would on a 4-stroke. You've got to feather it a lot more and feel what information the engine is trying to give you.
You're forced to be in the correct gear at all times, because if you get caught napping, you'll be in too high a gear, therefore you won't be in the power band, and it will just be plain slow. It makes you pay attention to what the engine wants.
You'll very quickly learn to care about this bike too, because if you don't learn to have mechanical sympathy, it will break. Even if you don't warm it up properly before riding, it won't run nicely until it is warm. I'm also willing to bet that the best mechanics probably grew up riding 2-strokes. Modern 4-stroke 125s are so reliable that you probably won't ever get the chance to learn how to work on them.
The power valve on this needs to be cleaned every now and then, as I recently learned. It's never too late to learn from a 2-stroke. You have to keep the 2-stroke oil topped up, you'll have to clean the carb out every so often, and even change the piston and rings, because these little motors make all that horsepower because they work hard.
And all of this will make you a better all-round biker than the comparable 4-stroke rider, setting you up for any bike you want to own or ride in the future.
So then why doesn't every 16-year-old ride one of these if it's better in every single way?
Well, unfortunately, they don't even make them anymore. The Aprilia wasn't your only option for a 125 two-stroke, but even they stopped making them over a decade ago in 2011.
I don't know if you've noticed the delicious smoke that pours out of this exhaust, but apparently environmental activists don't think it smells as good as we do.
As far as I know, they also didn't sell these in the US for street use. They were insanely popular in Europe, but for some reason, the US never got the privilege of smelling these riding around.
But very few people buy these now, because
why would you? It's really difficult to justify buying and riding such an old and temperamental motorcycle when newer and more reliable options do exist. This is a 2005 model, for example, and despite still looking amazing, that does make it 18 years old. At that age, it could get its own motorcycle license. You don't ever have to touch modern 4-strokes. You change the oil, put some fuel in, and they're good to go. You'll never even get a peek at its piston. And although this RS125, for example, isn't that expensive in the grand scheme of things, it is kind of a lot for such an old 125. But that is also what makes it even more special in my opinion. If you can get your hands on one of these, few people will understand why you might want it. But those who do understand will really respect your choice. And you'll be the coolest and fastest 16-year-old in the world.